Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights and journey back to the sun-drenched, marble-laden world of ancient Greece. We're not going to talk about battles or philosophies in the usual way, but about something far more subtle, and for the ancients, profoundly important how their magnificent temples, those shimmering homes of the gods, were sealed against evil. Imagine, if you will, the majestic Parthenon standing proudly on the Athenian Acropolis, its white marble gleaming. You see the elegant columns, the intricate sculptures, but beneath that grand facade, there was a whole hidden world of belief and ritual, a desperate attempt to protect these sacred spaces from malevolent forces. You can almost feel the gentle sea breeze carrying the scent of olive trees and a faint whiff of incense, mingling with the quiet hum of unseen protections. For the ancient Greeks, their temples weren't just buildings, they were literal dwelling places for their deities, conduits of divine power, and vital links between the human and divine realms. And just as a home needs to be secured, so too did these sacred sanctuaries need protection from spiritual corruption, from vengeful spirits, from curses, and from the insidious influence of malevolent forces. You probably wouldn't survive a single night if you were tasked with being the sole guard against all the spiritual threats they believed in. You'd be jumping at every shadow, every creak of the ancient stone, convinced that something unseen was trying to breach the divine defenses. This was a vigilance that extended beyond the physical, into the very fabric of the cosmos. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps this little corner of the internet grow, and it lets me know these sleepy historical deep dives are finding their audience. And if you're feeling up to it, drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the foot of a towering, gleaming marble structure, its columns rising majestically towards the clear blue attic sky. The scent of olive trees and dry earth hangs in the air, occasionally mixed with the faint, sweet smell of burnt offerings. This is an ancient Greek temple, a beacon of architectural brilliance and profound religious devotion. But as you gaze upon its timeless beauty, you begin to grasp a hidden layer of its existence, the deep-seated belief among the Greeks that these sacred sanctuaries were constantly under peril from malevolent forces, and therefore required intricate, unseen protections. For the ancient Greeks, their relationship with the divine was intimate and complex. The gods and goddesses of Olympus were powerful, capricious, and deeply involved in human affairs. They could bestow blessings, but also unleash terrible wrath beyond the Olympian pantheon. There was a vast array of lesser deities, spirits, demons not necessarily evil, but powerful and unpredictable entities, and the restless shades of the dead. Not all of these beings were benevolent, in fact. Many were perceived as sources of misfortune, disease, madness, or spiritual corruption. A temple, as the dwelling place of a god, was a focal point of divine power. It was where the human and divine worlds most closely intersected. This very proximity to the divine, however, also made it a target, just as light casts a shadow. Immense spiritual power was believed to attract opposing, malevolent forces. Imagine a beacon of pure energy in a dark, chaotic ocean. It would inevitably draw unwanted attention. The Greeks believed that evil could manifest in various ways as ill omens, as spiritual pollution, as curses, as disruptive spirits seeking to corrupt the sacred or diminish the god's influence. Consider the concept of miasma, a pervasive idea in Greek thought. This wasn't just physical dirt, it was spiritual pollution, an invisible stain that could attach itself to individuals, places, or objects through acts of murder, sacrilege, or other transgressions. A temple, if tainted by miasma, would lose its sacred power, offend the deity, and bring misfortune upon the community. The fear of miasma meant that meticulous rituals of purification and protection were essential to maintain the sanctity of the temple. You wouldn't just waltz into a temple after touching something ritually unclean. You would undergo a purification ritual first. To avoid carrying spiritual pollution into the god's home, the perceived sources of peril were manifold. There were human curses, invoked by wronged individuals or hostile states. Imagine an enemy city-state, defeated in battle, performing a dark ritual to lay a curse upon the victorious city's main temple, hoping to weaken its patron deity. There were demonic influences, malevolent spirits seeking to possess or corrupt the sacred space, and there was the inherent chaos of the wild, the untamed forces of nature that could disrupt the order and harmony of a sacred precinct. Even the very act of constructing a temple could expose it to danger. The groundbreaking ceremonies, the quarrying of sacred stone, the transport and raising of massive columns each stage was fraught with potential risks, requiring careful rituals to appease chthonic deities, gods of the underworld, and ward off jealous spirits. You wouldn't just start digging a foundation. You would perform elaborate sacrifices and prayers, asking for divine protection for the very ground you were about to build upon. Historians and scholars of Greek religion frequently debate the precise nature and degree of belief in evil forces versus simply unpredictable or amoral divine spirit entities. As the Greek pantheon often blurred the lines between benevolence and malice, this nuance highlights the complexity of ancient spiritual landscapes, a particularly eerie, yet common detail was the concern about ghosts or restless spirits of the unburied dead, or those who died violent deaths. These spirits were believed to wander, seeking solace or retribution, and could inadvertently or deliberately disturb sacred sites, temples, as places of intense spiritual energy, could attract such lost souls, requiring protective measures to keep them from polluting the sanctity of the precinct. You wouldn't want a restless phantom disrupting your prayer to Athena, would you? The protection of temples extended beyond the physical structure. The entire temenos, the sacred precinct, often enclosed by a wall, was considered a ritually pure space. Any transgression within this boundary, any act of violence or disrespect, was seen as a grave offense against the deity and a potential breach in the temple's spiritual defenses. This meant constant vigilance, strict rules of conduct, and dedicated guardians to maintain the sanctity of the entire holy area. The very richness of offerings within a temple also created a target. Temples were repositories of immense wealth, dedicated to the gods' gold and silver statues, votive offerings of precious metals and jewels, valuable artworks. This material wealth, while honoring the deity, also presented a practical danger theft, while not a supernatural evil. The act of sacrilege theft or desecration of sacred property was considered a heinous crime, punished severely by both human law and divine wrath. The fear of sacrilege motivated physical security measures, but also spiritual protections, believing that the gods themselves would strike down those who dared to steal from their house. So, as you step back from the gleaming marble and the sun-drenched stones, you begin to grasp the deep, pervasive sense of peril that surrounded ancient Greek temples. They were not just beautiful buildings, they were fragile spiritual strongholds, constantly threatened by miasma, curses, restless spirits, and human greed. Understanding this underlying fear is crucial to appreciating the extraordinary lengths to which the Greeks went to seal them against evil, ensuring the purity and power of their divine sanctuaries. You've explored the pervasive fear of spiritual peril that surrounded ancient Greek temples. Now, let's consider the first line of defense. The tangible methods employed to protect these sacred spaces, boundary stones, and wards. These weren't just decorative markers, they were deeply symbolic physical barriers and magical indicators, carefully placed to define, purify, and protect the hallowed ground from malevolent influences. Imagine the sacred precinct, or temenos, of a Greek temple. It wasn't just an arbitrary plot of land, it was a specifically designated, ritually purified area set apart from the mundane world. The very first step in sealing it against evil was to clearly delineate its borders. This was achieved with boundary stones, known as heroi or peribola stones. These were often simple, unadorned blocks of stone, but they were deeply significant, inscribed with words like horos, boundary, or indicating the deity to whom the land was consecrated. They served as a constant, visible reminder that you were entering a sacred space, a domain under divine protection. You might feel the solemn weight of these ancient stones as you pass them. They weren't just physical markers, they were believed to possess a spiritual force that warned away transgressors, both human and unseen. To cross these stones without proper reverence, or with ill intent, was to invite the wrath of the gods. It was a subtle, yet powerful, psychological deterrent, reinforcing the sanctity of the ground, beyond mere demarcation. These boundary stones and the enclosing walls of the temenos could also be imbued with protective wards. Think of it as a spiritual fence, designed not just to keep people out, but to filter negative energies and prevent the entry of malevolent spirits or curses. This could involve rituals performed during the laying of the foundation stones for the wall, or the inscription of protective symbols onto the stones themselves. Though such details are rarely preserved, consider the role of apotropaic devices. These were objects or symbols specifically intended to avert evil, to turn away misfortune. You might find them incorporated into the architecture of the temple or its surrounding structures. The most common example is the gorgonian, the head of Medusa, often carved on pediments or door lintels. Her terrifying, wide-eyed gaze was believed to turn evil to stone, literally petrifying any malevolent force that dared to approach. Imagine the chilling stare of such a carving as you walk towards the temple entrance. A silent, fearsome guardian. Another form of ward could be animal figures, particularly those associated with the temple's specific deity, lions, often associated with powerful goddesses like Cybele, might be carved as imposing sentinels at the temple gates. Snakes, symbols of healing and wisdom, could be depicted coiling around columns or altars. These weren't just artistic flourishes, they were believed to be symbolic guardians, imbued with the protective power of the animals themselves or the deities they represented, ready to repel any spiritual threat. Archaeologists and art historians actively debate the precise balance between aesthetic function, symbolic meaning, and literal apotropaic efficacy in the placement of architectural carvings and decorative elements on Greek temples. The lines are often blurred, making definitive interpretations challenging, a peculiar, yet effective. Ward was the strategic placement of water features or purification basins, parentaria, at temple entrances. You would often be required to wash your hands or sprinkle yourself with water before entering the temenos. This wasn't just about hygiene, it was a ritual act of purification, believed to cleanse you of any miasma or spiritual pollution you might be carrying. The water itself, consecrated through prayer, acted as a powerful ward, repelling negative energies and ensuring that only the ritually pure could enter the sacred space. It's like a spiritual airlock, designed to prevent contamination. The very geometry and orientation of the temple could also function as a form of ward. As we briefly touched upon with Celtic mounds, many Greek temples were precisely aligned with astronomical events, the rising of specific stars, the solstices, or the equinoxes. This wasn't just about honoring the cosmos, it was believed to draw down specific divine energies, creating a protective aura around the temple. the sacred geometry of the building itself, mirroring the harmony of the universe, became an inherent shield against chaos and malevolence. Consider the less tangible, yet equally potent, ward of divine presence. The belief that the deity literally inhabited the temple, residing within its cult statue, was a powerful deterrent to evil. The temple wasn't just for the god, it was the god's home. To attack or desecrate such a space was to directly confront the deity themselves, inviting their immediate and terrible wrath. This pervasive belief acted as an invisible shield, more potent than any physical barrier. You wouldn't try to break into the house of Zeus, would you? One subtle, often overlooked detail is the use of votive offerings not just as thanks, but as perpetual wards. Individuals might dedicate small lead tablets or bronze objects with protective inscriptions to the temple, burying them within its foundations or placing them near the entrance. These were personal prayers for protection, layered onto the temple's inherent defenses, creating a cumulative spiritual barrier. It's like adding tiny, silent charms to a mighty fortress. So, as you step away from the glistening marble and the subtle signs of ancient protection, you begin to grasp how ancient Greek temples were sealed against evil from their very foundations. Through boundary stones and wards, imbued with apotropaic power and a deep understanding of ritual purity, the Greeks meticulously crafted spiritual fortresses, ensuring that their sacred sanctuaries remained pristine homes for their powerful, and often demanding, gods. You've explored the physical and symbolic protections of boundary stones and wards that sealed ancient Greek temples. Now, let's delve into an even more direct form of divine interaction: the various ritual offerings to avert malevolence. These weren't just gifts of thanks. They were meticulously planned sacrifices, prayers, and dedications made to appease deities, to repel evil forces, and to ensure the continuous sanctity of the temple against any lurking spiritual threat. Imagine a bustling temple precinct, filled with the murmur of worshippers. You observe priests, their faces solemn, guiding a procession towards the altar. In their hands, they carry animals for sacrifice: a pure white lamb, a majestic bull, or perhaps a small piglet. This isn't just a communal meal, it's a profound ritual, a direct form of communication with the gods, designed not only to gain their favor, but specifically to avert malevolence. The blood and smoke rising from the altar were believed to purify the air, to nourish the deities, and to create a protective barrier around the sacred space. The type of animal sacrificed was often highly specific to the deity being honored, and the nature of the malevolence being averted. For example, dark-colored animals or those associated with the underworld might be offered to chthonic deities to appease restless spirits or ward off underworld curses. Pure, unblemished animals were offered to Olympian gods to maintain their favor and ensure their protection against all forms of evil. You could almost smell the faint metallic scent of blood mixing with the fragrant smoke. A powerful, visceral sensory experience meant to engage the gods directly, beyond animal sacrifice. Libations were a constant part of temple rituals. Imagine a priest pouring wine, olive oil, honey, or milk from an elegant vessel onto the altar or into the ground. These liquid offerings were believed to nourish the gods and spirits, ensuring their goodwill and continued vigilance over the temple. A particular form of libation might be poured specifically to cleanse the ground of any spiritual impurity, or to seal it against the intrusion of negative energies. It was a fluid, flowing prayer, continuously renewing the protective shield around the sacred space. Scholars of ancient Greek religion frequently highlight the complex motivations behind offerings, noting that they often simultaneously expressed gratitude, sought future favor, and aimed to avert misfortune or divine wrath. Making clear distinctions between these purposes challenging in archaeological contexts. This complexity means a single offering could serve multiple functions, A unique and often surprising form of offering was votive plaques or curse tablets depictions, repurposed. While curse tablets were usually meant to harm, sometimes an individual who believed they had been cursed or wanted to ward off evil from their family might dedicate a curse tablet to a temple and bury it within its grounds. Not to curse others, but to bind the evil and protect themselves and the temple from it. Imagine turning a weapon against its own kind. Trapping the malevolence in the sacred soil. This highly specialized use of a negative magical tool for a positive. Protective outcome is a fascinating, subtle detail. Then there were the personal dedications made by individuals. These could range from small terracotta figurines, miniature masks, or simple pieces of jewelry to more elaborate statues. While many were expressions of gratitude, others were dedications made in times of fear or crisis, specifically petitioning the deity for protection against disease, bad luck, or malevolent spirits affecting their homes or families. The cumulative effect of thousands of such pleas, imbued with human hope and fear, would have created a potent spiritual resonance within the temple precinct, reinforcing its protective aura. Consider the role of purification rituals that often accompanied offerings. Before any major sacrifice or dedication, both the priests and the worshippers would undergo meticulous cleansing. This involved washing with sacred water, fumigating with incense, or even fasting. The idea was that only the ritually pure could approach the divine, and that spiritual purity itself acted as a powerful ward against miasma and evil. The very act of cleansing was an offering, a preparation that created an invisible shield against unwanted spiritual intrusions into the sacred space. It's like sanitizing a room before a delicate operation. But on a spiritual level, a particularly eerie, yet significant detail is the offering of first fruits or first portions of harvests and hunts. These offerings were not just a way of thanking the gods, they were a way of acknowledging the deity's dominion over the natural world and seeking their blessing to avert blight, famine, or pestilence, which could all be seen as manifestations of divine displeasure or malevolent forces. The generosity of the offering was believed to ensure the continued fertility and health of the land, and thus the community. The continuous nature of these offerings was crucial. Temples weren't sealed once and then forgotten. They required constant vigilance, regular sacrifices, and daily libations to maintain their sanctity and protective power. The priests and priestesses who served the temple dedicated their lives to these rituals, acting as constant intermediaries, tirelessly working to ensure the divine favor remained strong and the forces of evil were kept at bay. It was a never-ending spiritual battle, fought through prayer and offering. So, as you quietly observe the ancient rituals of sacrifice and dedication, you gain a deeper appreciation for how ancient Greek temples were sealed against evil, not just by stone, but by unwavering devotion and profound ritual, through offerings to avert malevolence. The Greeks constantly renewed their spiritual defenses, ensuring their sacred sanctuaries remained pristine homes for their powerful, and often demanding gods. You've explored the meticulous offerings designed to avert malevolence and keep Greek temples pure. Now, let's consider the sentinels, the imposing figures that stood guard, ensuring no evil could pass. We're going to delve into the role of guardians of the gates, witnessing how divine images, symbolic figures, and even the very architecture of temple entrances were crafted to actively protect these sacred spaces. Imagine approaching a grand Greek temple. You've passed the boundary stones, perhaps performed a purification, and now you stand before the towering entrance. You aren't just looking at columns and pediments. You are facing a meticulously designed spiritual barrier. The very threshold was a sacred point, a boundary between the mundane and the divine, and it was fiercely protected. One of the most common and visually striking guardians was the use of apotropaic images. These were figures or symbols specifically intended to turn away or repel evil. The most famous example is the Gorgonion, the terrifying head of Medusa carved on the pediments, the metopes panels between triglyphs or prominently above the doorways. Her wide, unblinking eyes and snake hair were believed to literally petrify any malevolent force that dared to approach. Imagine her chilling gaze fixed on you as you entered. A silent, fearsome warning to any ill-intentioned entity. This wasn't just decoration, it was an active magical deterrent. A spiritual bouncer for the gods, beyond Medusa. Other monstrous or fearsome figures could serve as guardians. Sphinxes, with their enigmatic power and protective associations, might flank an entrance. Mythical beasts, like lions or griffins, often associated with strength and vigilance, were frequently depicted in sculptural programs. These creatures were believed to be literal protectors, animated by divine will to ward off evil spirits, curses, or human trespassers with malicious intent. You wouldn't try to sneak past a stone lion if you truly believed it could roar to life and tear you limb from limb. Consider the powerful presence of the cult statue within the naos, the inner sanctuary of the temple. While not at the gate, the very belief that the deity themselves resided within the temple, embodied in their magnificent statue, acted as the ultimate guardian. The temple was their home, and the god's watchful presence was the supreme deterrent. Any evil force attempting to penetrate the sacred space would have to contend directly with the wrath of the god, a terrifying prospect for any ancient Greek. This invisible, omnipresent divine presence was perhaps the most formidable guardian of all. Scholars debate the extent to which the general populace truly believed in the literal animated power of apotropaic figures, or if they were primarily symbolic representations of divine protection. However, their pervasive use strongly suggests a genuine belief in their efficacy as wards against evil. This highlights the blend of popular belief and formal religious practice. A more subtle, yet crucial, guardian was the priestly hierarchy and their attendants. These individuals, from the high priest to the humble temple servant, were the human guardians of the gate. They performed the daily rituals of purification, oversaw offerings, and ensured that only the ritually pure and well-intentioned entered the sacred space. Their constant vigilance, their knowledge of ritual protocol, and their direct connection to the deity acted as a living, breathing shield against spiritual corruption. You wouldn't just wander in, you would be observed, perhaps questioned, and certainly guided through the appropriate preliminary rites. The very design of the entranceway itself could function as a protective mechanism. Often, a temple's approach involved a series of steps, a propylon monumental gateway, and then the temple itself. This tiered approach created multiple thresholds, each potentially imbued with its own protective rituals or symbolic wards. The act of passing through these successive gates was a physical and spiritual progression, a gradual shedding of the mundane and an entry into the increasingly sacred. Each step was a form of purification, sealing you, and by extension, the temple, against evil, a peculiar, often overlooked. Detail is the potential for foundation deposits, while rarely excavated in ancient temples due to the destructive nature of such work. Some archaeological evidence from other ancient cultures suggests that protective objects, animal sacrifices, or even cursed tablets reversed to be protective were sometimes buried within the temple's foundations. These unseen elements, placed during the very initial construction, would act as foundational guardians, sealing the temple from below against malevolent forces rising from the earth itself. It's like placing a spiritual rebar within the very concrete of the building. Finally, the very act of prayer and offerings made by the faithful acted as a collective spiritual shield. Every votive dedication, every whispered supplication, every act of piety added to the temple's protective aura. The cumulative spiritual energy generated by devout worship created a powerful, ongoing war that kept malevolent forces at bay, ensuring the sanctity and security of the god's dwelling. So, as you quietly reflect on the powerful figures and hidden rituals protecting the entrances to ancient Greek temples, you begin to grasp how they were sealed against evil through guardians of the gates, both sculpted and living, seen and unseen. The Greeks ensured that their most sacred spaces remained pristine, protected homes for their powerful deities, eternally vigilant against the forces of chaos and corruption. You've explored the formidable sentinels guarding the entrances of Greek temples. Now, let's go deeper into the heart of their protective measures. Venturing beyond the visible and into the meticulous practices designed to keep spiritual corruption at bay, ritual purity. Spiritual shield. This is about the ancient Greek obsession with cleanliness, not just of the body, but of the soul, believing that a state of purity was the most potent defense against malevolence. Imagine entering the temenos, the sacred precinct of a Greek temple, before you even approach the temple building itself. You would be expected to undergo specific acts of purification. This wasn't merely a polite custom, it was a deeply ingrained spiritual imperative. The most common ritual involved washing hands or sprinkling water from a pyriventarian, a large stone basin filled with consecrated water, usually placed at the entrance of the precinct. You would dip your hands, perhaps even your face, into the cool water, feeling it cleanse not just the dirt, but any lingering miasma or spiritual pollution you might carry. This concept of miasma is crucial to understanding Greek purity. It wasn't just physical dirt, it was an invisible, contagious spiritual stain caused by contact with death, childbirth, murder, sacrilege, or certain other transgressions. Anyone carrying miasma was considered offensive to the gods and a danger to the sanctity of a sacred space. To enter a temple while ritually impure was believed to invite divine wrath and to actively contaminate the god's dwelling, weakening its protective aura and opening it to evil influences. You wouldn't think of bringing a muddy dog into a pristine temple. And to the Greeks, miasma was far more polluting. Consider the meticulousness of these purification rites. Priests and priestesses, who spent their lives within the sacred precincts, adhered to even stricter codes of purity. They might have dietary restrictions, abstain from certain activities, or undergo daily elaborate cleansing rituals, ensuring their own bodies were constant spiritual shields. Their very existence was an act of purification, maintaining the integrity of the sacred space through their unwavering devotion to cleanliness. Historians and classical scholars frequently debate the exact origins and evolving interpretations of miasma in ancient Greek society, noting its fluid definition and varying degrees of severity across different contexts and historical periods. This ongoing discussion highlights the nuanced understanding required to grasp such a central concept, a peculiar yet vital form of purification involved fumigation. Imagine the pungent scent of burning incense, perhaps frankincense or myrrh, wafting through the temple. This wasn't just for pleasant aroma. The smoke was believed to be a powerful cleansing agent, carrying away negative energies, driving out malevolent spirits, and purifying the air of any lingering miasma. The rising smoke was also an offering to the gods, ascending to the heavens, further cementing the divine connection and protection. It's like a spiritual air purifier, constantly active. Beyond individual purification, the temple itself, and its sacred objects, would undergo regular ritual cleansing. The cult statue of the deity, housed within the naos, might be ritually washed or anointed with sacred oils. The altars would be meticulously cleaned after sacrifices, their blood and ashes removed, ensuring no impurity remained. Even the sacred vessels and implements used in rituals would be purified before and after use. This constant, repetitive cycle of cleansing was a vigilant act of defense, ensuring that the temple remained an unblemished, impenetrable spiritual shield. You might find evidence of ritual bathing facilities within or near temple precincts. Sometimes elaborate bathhouses for priests and dedicated worshippers. These weren't just for physical hygiene, they were for complete ritual immersion. A profound act of spiritual renewal that cleansed the body and soul before approaching the divine. The very act of stepping into the purified water was a commitment to purity, a fortification against the forces of corruption. The strict rules around who could enter certain parts of the temple also reflect this emphasis on purity. The inner sanctuary, the naos, where the cult statue resided, was often accessible only to priests or high-ranking officials. The most sacred areas, or the adyton, might be entirely off-limits to all but the highest priest or priestess. This restricted access was a form of protective layering, ensuring that only the most ritually pure and dedicated individuals could approach the divine presence. Minimizing the risk of miasma or unwanted spiritual intrusions, it's like concentric circles of spiritual security, one subtle yet powerful. Aspect of this spiritual shield was the Greeks' belief that the gods themselves favored purity. A temple that was meticulously maintained in a state of ritual cleanliness was believed to be more pleasing to the deity, thus encouraging their continued presence and stronger protection. The diligence of the worshippers and priests in upholding purity was seen as an offering in itself, a constant reinforcement of the divine human covenant. So, as you quietly contemplate the intricate rituals of cleansing and the pervasive concern for ritual purity, you gain a profound understanding of how ancient Greek temples were sealed against evil. It wasn't just about physical barriers, it was about creating a continuous spiritual shield through meticulous hygiene, dedicated practices, and an unwavering belief that purity was the ultimate defense against all forms of malevolence. Ensuring the eternal sanctity of the gods' homes, you've explored the meticulously crafted spiritual shield of ritual purity around Greek temples. Now, let's consider a more mysterious, powerful, and often fear-inducing aspect of their protection, the oracle's protective power. This is about how the cryptic pronouncements of inspired seers, believed to be the direct voice of the gods, were used not just for guidance, but as a formidable, often terrifying, defense mechanism for temples and the communities they served. Imagine yourself in ancient Greece, perhaps approaching the sacred site of Delphi, nestled high on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. The air here feels charged, thick with the scent of laurel and sulphurous fumes from the chasm, mingling with the whispers of pilgrims. At the heart of this sanctuary stood the Temple of Apollo, home to the most famous oracle in the ancient world, the Pythia. Her pronouncements, often delivered in a trance state, were believed to be the direct words of Apollo himself. And these words, though often ambiguous, carried immense authority, not just for political decisions, but for warding off spiritual threats. The oracle's protective power stemmed from its direct connection to the divine. If a community or a temple was threatened by a plague, a famine, or a perceived spiritual malevolence, they would often consult the oracle. The Pythia's response, carefully interpreted by the priests, might prescribe specific rituals, offerings, or architectural modifications to appease an angered deity or to repel an invading evil. Imagine the relief, or perhaps the chilling understanding. That would come with a divine directive on how to fight an unseen enemy. Consider the role of prophecy in averting curses or spiritual blight. If a city was plagued by misfortune, believed to be the result of a divine curse or malevolent spirit, the oracle might reveal the origin of the problem, perhaps an ancient transgression, an unavenged murder, or a desecrated shrine. The prescribed remedy, often a complex purification ritual or a specific dedication, was then believed to lift the curse, effectively sealing the community and its sacred spaces from further harm. The oracle, in essence, provided the spiritual diagnosis and the divine cure, historians and classicists continue to debate the exact mechanisms behind the Pythia's prophecies. Ranging from geological explanations, natural gases from the chasm, to psychological and ritualistic factors. Though the ancients undeniably believed in the divine inspiration of her pronouncements. This enduring mystery only adds to the allure of the oracle's power, a particularly chilling, yet effective aspect was the oracle's ability to identify and condemn sacrilege. Temples, as repositories of immense wealth, were constant targets for thieves. But stealing from a god was not just a crime, it was an act of sacrilege, inviting divine wrath. If temple treasures were stolen, or a sacred space was desecrated, the oracle might be consulted. Her pronouncement could not only confirm the sacrilege, but also identify the perpetrator, often cryptically, or, more terrifyingly, pronounce a divine curse upon them and their lineage. This supernatural enforcement of law was a powerful deterrent, far more effective than any earthly police force. You wouldn't want to be named by the Pythia as a temple thief. Your life, and perhaps your eternal soul, would be forfeit. The oracle's warnings also served as a protective shield against unseen dangers. Imagine a plague sweeping through the land. The oracle might reveal that the plague was sent by Apollo, angered by a specific transgression, and prescribe offerings or rituals to placate him. Or, perhaps, warn against a looming military threat, advising strategic actions that, to human eyes, might seem counterintuitive, but when followed, led to success. These pronouncements instilled a profound sense of security. The community felt guided by the gods themselves, their sacred spaces under constant divine vigilance, a unique, often overlooked detail is the oracle's role in founding new colonies and temples. When a Greek city planned to expand or establish a new settlement, they would often consult the Delphic oracle for guidance. The oracle might specify the exact location for the new city, or even the precise spot for its primary temple. This divine mandate ensured that the new sacred spaces were established with divine blessing and inherent protection. Their very foundations consecrated by Apollo's will. It's like getting divine architectural plans. The fear of defying an oracle's pronouncement was immense. To ignore Apollo's word was to invite immediate and terrible divine wrath upon oneself and one's community. This fear ensured that the oracle's protective power was respected and that its directives, even if arduous or costly, were meticulously followed. The oracle wasn't just a source of information, it was a living, breathing component of the temple's security system, powered by direct divine communication. So, as you quietly reflect on the mysterious pronouncements and the profound influence of the oracle, you gain a deeper understanding of how ancient Greek temples were sealed against evil, through the oracle's protective power. The words of the gods themselves became an impenetrable shield, guiding communities, averting curses, and fiercely guarding the sanctity of their most sacred sanctuaries. You've explored the mysterious protective power of the oracles that guarded Greek temples. Now, let's delve into one of the most chilling and formidable defenses wielded by the ancient Greek priesthood, cursing the desecrators. This wasn't just a simple prayer for bad luck. It was a terrifying, formal invocation of divine wrath, specifically aimed at anyone who dared to violate the sanctity of a temple, steal its treasures, or harm its sacred personnel. Imagine yourself in ancient Greece, and you've just committed the unspeakable act of sacrilege. Perhaps you stole a golden votive offering from a temple, or defiled a sacred altar, or harmed a priest or priestess. You might believe you've gotten away with it. But for the ancient Greeks, such an act didn't just incur legal punishment, it invited an immediate, relentless, and often generational divine curse from the offended deity. The temple, in a sense, had its own spiritual defense mechanism, ready to unleash cosmic retribution. The priests and priestesses, as the direct representatives of the gods, held the authority to formally invoke these curses. You wouldn't hear a casual curse. This was a solemn, ritualistic pronouncement, often delivered publicly, to warn others and to ensure the gods' swift vengeance upon the perpetrator. Imagine a high priest, his face grim, standing before the very altar you desecrated, calling upon the wrath of Zeus, Athena, or Apollo to relentlessly pursue you, to blight your life, and to doom your lineage. The very air would seem to thicken with dread, and the words would carry the weight of divine judgment. These curses were meticulously crafted to target specific aspects of the desecrator's life and their future. They weren't vague pronouncements. A curse might call for sterility, ensuring your line would die out. A terrifying fate in a culture obsessed with lineage and legacy. It might invoke madness, driving you to insanity and social ruin. It could call for perpetual poverty or failure in all endeavors, ensuring your life was a living hell of endless struggle. Or, most terrifyingly, it could demand a painful and ignominious death, often by unnatural means, followed by a tormented afterlife. The punishment was often tailored to fit the crime, a cosmic justice meticulously served. Consider the curse tablets Defixion as we discussed before, but now with a divine twist. While many Deficciones were personal, some were dedicated by temple authorities or devout individuals specifically against sacrilegious acts. These tablets, often inscribed with explicit appeals to underworld deities like Persephone or Hades, would formally request divine punishment upon anyone who stole from the temple or desecrated its sacred objects. Imagine your name appearing on such a tablet, secretly buried near the temple, meant to spiritually bind you to endless suffering. It's like a divine arrest warrant, issued from beyond the grave. Scholars debate the extent to which these formal curses were believed to be immediately efficacious, or if they primarily served as powerful psychological deterrents and legal warnings, reinforcing the sacrosanct nature of temple property and personnel. However, the pervasive fear of divine retribution suggests that the belief in their power was very real for the general populace, a particularly disturbing, yet effective. Detail was the belief that the gods would pursue not just the immediate desecrator, but their entire family or lineage. This concept of generational curses for sacrilege was a powerful deterrent. Imagine being a parent, knowing that your child's future, and your grandchildren's futures, could be blighted by your single act of greed or disrespect against a temple. This terror ensured that families themselves would often police their members, preventing such transgressions for fear of cosmic retribution. The punishment transcended the individual, becoming a terrifying, indelible stain on the family name. The historical record offers chilling examples of individuals who were believed to have been struck down by such curses. Plagues, famines, military defeats all could be attributed to a god's wrath unleashed upon a community for allowing sacrilege to go unpunished. The stories served as powerful cautionary tales, reinforcing the absolute necessity of respecting divine property and personnel. You wouldn't risk bringing a plague upon your entire city just to pocket a few temple coins, even if a desecrator managed to escape human justice. The belief persisted that divine justice would inevitably find them. There was no hiding from the gods. Their curse would cling to you like a shadow, eroding your life from within, manifesting as unexplained illness, financial ruin, or social alienation. It was a terrifying form of spiritual persecution, relentless and inescapable. So, as you quietly reflect on the formidable power of cursing the desecrators, you gain a profound understanding of how ancient Greek temples were sealed against evil, not just by stone and ritual, but by the terrifying invocation of divine wrath. The threat of spiritual damnation and relentless curses, reaching across generations, served as an ultimate, brutal deterrent, ensuring that the sacred sanctuaries remained inviolate, fiercely protected by the very gods they honored. You've explored the terrifying power of divine curses aimed at temple desecrators. Now, let's delve into a more enigmatic and often overlooked aspect of ancient Greek: temple protection hidden charms. Secret seals. This is about the esoteric practices, the concealed magical defenses, and the subtle, unseen rituals embedded within the very fabric of the temple, designed to repel malevolence from within and without. Far from public view, imagine a priest or architect performing a ritual not in the grand public space of the temple, but in the deepest, most unseen parts of its construction. These were the hidden acts, known only to a select few, designed to imbue the temple with a constant, active spiritual shield. These secret seals were not typically found in open display, but were concealed within foundation stones, under altars, or within specially prepared cavities in the walls, perpetually working their magic. One fascinating possibility involves the use of ritual deposits or foundation offerings during the initial construction of the temple. While concrete archaeological evidence is rare due to the destructive nature of excavating foundations, ancient texts and parallels from other cultures suggest that items believed to possess protective properties might have been buried within the very first layers of the building. This could include specific types of stones, metals, herbs, or even small, symbolic animal sacrifices, ritually placed to consecrate and protect the structure from the ground up. You wouldn't see these, gang. They would be silently working their magic, anchoring the temple in spiritual purity. Consider the deliberate placement of apotropaic symbols not just on the exterior, but in concealed areas, while the gorgonion might be prominently displayed on the pediment. Smaller, more esoteric symbols might be carved on the underside of roof tiles, on hidden blocks within the wall, or on the bases of statues that were never meant to be seen. These subtle hidden markings were believed to act as an internal spiritual firewall, preventing malevolent energies from penetrating the sacred space or corrupting it from within. It's like a secret circuit board of magical protection. Then there's the use of magical inscriptions or charms, written on perishable materials like papyrus, linen, or wood, then carefully rolled up and concealed within crevices or specially made cavities in the temple walls. These texts would contain prayers, incantations, or appeals to protective deities or powerful spirits, intended to constantly emanate a protective aura. Imagine a small, crumbling scroll, discovered millennia later in a hidden niche, its faint words still carrying the echoes of ancient protective magic. The fragility of these materials means archaeological evidence is incredibly rare, but the widespread belief in such practices suggests their prevalence. Archaeologists often face challenges in identifying ritual deposits versus mere refuse or accidental inclusions in ancient construction, requiring meticulous contextual analysis and comparative data from other known ritual sites to infer intentionality. This contributes to the secret nature of these findings, as they are not always immediately obvious. A particularly eerie, yet powerful, form of secret seal involved the ritualistic killing of building materials. This refers to the belief that certain materials, particularly stone, had a living spirit. To incorporate them into a sacred building required a ritual act of killing that spirit, ensuring it was bound to the temple's purpose and didn't carry any wild, unpredictable, or malevolent energy into the sacred structure. While hard to prove archaeologically, the precise quarrying and shaping of certain stones might have been accompanied by such rituals, ensuring their purity and protective power from the moment they were extracted from the earth. The concept of binding spells could also be applied to the temple itself. Through complex rituals, priests or initiated magi might have metaphysically bound the temple, preventing curses from attaching to it, or sealing it off from malevolent spiritual entry. This would involve specific chants, offerings, and perhaps the symbolic encircling of the temple with consecrated threads or substances. These intangible seals, though leaving little archaeological trace, were believed to be incredibly potent, you might find evidence of small, buried effigies or amulets placed at strategic points within the temple grounds, particularly at vulnerable spots like corners or gateways not covered by larger, public apotropaic figures. These could be small clay figures of protective deities or animals, or a collection of specific stones believed to repel evil. These were the tiny, hidden sentinels, silently guarding the sacred boundaries. One intriguing, subtle detail is the belief in vows or dedications made by the original builders or patrons, which were believed to spiritually protect the temple. The very intention and piety infused into the construction process, formalized by solemn oaths to the deity, could create an inherent, unseen shield around the sacred space. This highlights that protection wasn't just about objects or rituals, but also about the spiritual integrity and devotion of those who created and maintained the temple. So, as you quietly contemplate the concealed layers of protection within ancient Greek temples, you begin to grasp how they were sealed against evil through hidden charms and secret seals. These esoteric practices, known only to a few, added an invisible, yet potent, dimension to the temple's defenses, ensuring its sanctity and guarding it against unseen threats. A silent testament to the Greeks' profound understanding of spiritual warfare, you've explored the subtle, secret charms and seals hidden within Greek temples. Now, let's consider how the very visible, deliberate construction of these magnificent structures was, in itself, a powerful act of protection. We're going to delve into sacred geometry's aegis, understanding how architectural design, precise mathematical ratios, and deliberate spatial arrangements were believed to offer divine protection and create a harmonious, impenetrable shield against malevolence. Imagine yourself as an ancient Greek architect, not just designing a beautiful building, but crafting a sacred space that was literally a reflection of cosmic order. For the Greeks, beauty and harmony were not merely aesthetic ideals, they were manifestations of divine truth and mathematical perfection. By incorporating precise mathematical ratios and geometric principles into their temple designs, they believed they were aligning the earthly structure with the divine order of the cosmos, thereby imbuing it with inherent protection against the forces of chaos and evil. Consider the ubiquitous golden ratio phi, f1.618, and the proportions derived from it. While the direct, conscious application of phi in every Greek temple is a subject of ongoing academic debate, it's undeniable that Greek architects favored specific, harmonious ratios like 1, 2, 2, 3, or 4, 9 in their column diameters. Intercolumniation and overall building dimensions, these ratios were believed to be intrinsically beautiful and divinely inspired. By structuring a temple according to these perfect proportions, they believed they were creating a microcosm of cosmic harmony, a space that inherently repelled disorder and malevolence. You wouldn't think of evil being attracted to perfect symmetry, would you? The very layout and orientation of the temple were also crucial. As we touched on earlier, many temples were meticulously aligned with astronomical events, the rising of the sun at a solstice or equinox, or the setting of a particular star. This wasn't just about honoring the gods. It was about drawing down specific celestial energies into the temple, creating a powerful, dynamic shield. The paths of light and shadow, dictated by these alignments, were believed to cleanse and purify the space, pushing away any lurking darkness. The temple became a cosmic receiver, constantly bathed in protective divine light. Architectural historians and classicists continuously analyze the mathematical precision and intentionality behind the proportional systems in Greek temples. While the existence of specific ratios is clear, the philosophical or mystical intent behind every instance remains an active area of scholarly discussion, often involving complex historical and mathematical interpretations. This highlights the depth of ongoing research into these ancient design principles. A particularly subtle yet powerful aspect was the use of symmetry and balance. Greek temples are renowned for their bilateral symmetry and harmonious proportions. This wasn't just pleasing to the eye, it was believed to represent order, stability, and divine perfection. Evil, chaos, and asymmetry were often seen as intertwined. By building a perfectly balanced and symmetrical temple, the Greeks were creating a physical manifestation of cosmic order, a sanctuary that inherently repelled disharmony and malevolent disruption. It's like building a fortress not with walls, but with pure, unassailable mathematical harmony. The columns themselves, rising towards the heavens, could be seen as symbolic guardians, supporting not just the roof but the very divine order that protected the temple. Their precise spacing, their subtle emphasis, a slight swelling in the middle to correct optical illusions, and their elegant fluting all contributed to a sense of living perfection, a powerful, protective presence. Imagine these columns as silent, watchful sentinels, holding back the forces of chaos with their inherent divine geometry. Even the materials chosen could contribute to the sacred geometry's aegis. Pristine, white marble, reflecting the sun's light, was not just aesthetically preferred, it was also associated with purity and divine light. Its very luminosity was seen as a deterrent to darkness and malevolence. Further enhancing the temple's protective aura, the material itself became part of the shield. You might find evidence of slight optical refinements in temple construction, such as columns leaning slightly inwards or platforms subtly curved. These weren't flaws, they were deliberate adjustments to make the temple appear perfectly straight and harmonious to the human eye from a distance. This meticulous pursuit of visual perfection, even at the cost of strict mechanical regularity, underscores the belief that a perfectly perceived structure was a perfectly protected structure. Pleasing to the gods and impenetrable to evil, it's a testament to their dedication to achieving a visual manifestation of divine harmony. The very act of designing and building such a mathematically perfect and harmonious structure was itself a ritual, an offering to the gods. The architects and builders, by dedicating their skill and knowledge to these precise proportions, were engaging in a profound act of piety, ensuring the temple was blessed and protected from its very conception. This infusion of human dedication and divine inspiration created a powerful, unseen aegis around the sacred space. So, as you quietly reflect on the intricate design and mathematical precision of ancient Greek temples, you begin to grasp how they were sealed against evil, not just by physical barriers or explicit rituals, but by the inherent power of sacred geometry's aegis. Through harmonious proportions, precise alignments, and a profound understanding of cosmic order, the Greeks crafted sanctuaries that were, in their very being, impenetrable fortresses of divine protection, forever echoing the harmony of the universe against the chaos of malevolence. You've explored the intricate sacred geometry that formed an invisible shield around ancient Greek temples. Now, as our journey through these meticulously protected sanctuaries gently comes to a close, let's reflect on the profound and enduring legacy of these beliefs, the whispers of ancient protection. These are the subtle ways in which the methods and anxieties of the past continue to resonate, reminding us of humanity's timeless need to define, defend, and imbue our sacred spaces with meaning against the perceived forces of evil. Imagine, one final time, standing amidst the ruins of a Greek temple, its marble softened by millennia of sun and rain. The columns may be broken, the roof long gone, but the sense of a dedicated, powerful space remains. This lingering aura is not just about historical significance. It's an echo of the countless rituals, prayers, and protective acts that once animated these stones. You can almost feel the presence of the invisible boundaries, the lingering scent of ancient incense, and the faint hum of a divine presence that once fiercely guarded this hallowed ground. The whispers of ancient protection remind us that the fear of evil, whether divine wrath, malevolent spirits, or human malice, is a constant throughout human history. What changes are the names we give to these threats and the methods we employ to combat them? The Greeks, with their complex pantheon and sophisticated philosophical thought, developed an intricate system of spiritual defense that was both practical and deeply symbolic. They understood that protection wasn't just about physical walls, but about purity of intent, alignment with cosmic order, and the constant vigilance of ritual. Think about how these ancient ideas subtly persist even in our modern world. While we don't build temples to Olympian gods, the concept of a sacred space endures. A church, a mosque, a synagogue, a Buddhist temple, these are still places set apart, often with their own forms of purification rituals. Architectural symbolism, and a collective belief in their sanctity that acts as a powerful, if intangible, shield against desecration or harm. You might not consciously think of it as sealing against evil, but the underlying reverence and protective measures are remarkably similar. The meticulousness of Greek temple construction, driven by a desire for divine harmony and protection, finds echoes in the careful design of modern religious architecture, where aesthetics and spiritual intent are often deeply intertwined. The use of specific materials, the play of light, the deliberate creation of an atmosphere of reverence. These are all descendants of the ancient Greek understanding that sacred spaces must reflect a higher order to be truly effective and protected. Cultural anthropologists often discuss the universal human tendency to delineate and sacralize specific spaces, arguing that this act of setting apart inherently creates a psychological and symbolic seal against perceived disorder or danger. Regardless of explicit religious belief, this highlights the deep human impulse to create sanctuary, a peculiar, yet intriguing detail is how ancient architectural traditions, even those with protective purposes, often filtered through later cultures. For example, some apotropaic elements, like grotesque gargoyles on medieval cathedrals, while visually different from Greek gorgoneons, share a common ancestral purpose to ward off malevolent forces from sacred buildings. The specific forms change, but the underlying drive for protection remains. The very idea of ritual purity continues in various forms today, from the washing of hands before prayer in many faiths, to the symbolic cleansing of spaces before sacred ceremonies. This enduring practice is a testament to the timeless belief that spiritual cleanliness is a prerequisite for approaching the divine and a fundamental defense against contamination. It's a quiet whisper from ancient Greece, reminding us that inner purity is often the strongest shield. Ultimately, the whispers of ancient protection reveal a profound human truth that we constantly strive to create order out of chaos, to define our sacred spaces, and to protect what we deem holy from what we perceive as evil. The ancient Greek temples, meticulously sealed against malevolence through complex rituals, physical wards, and divine invocations, stand as monumental reminders of this timeless quest. Their silent columns, weathered by time, still speak of a deep human longing for security, harmony, and the enduring presence of the divine. So, as your mind drifts from the sun-drenched marble and the hidden charms of ancient Greek temples, let the whispers of their protection gently fade. Feel the lingering coolness, the subtle sense of a space meticulously guarded against all threats. Allow the images of gods and rituals, of light and shadow, to dissolve into a profound and peaceful stillness. The stories of how ancient Greek temples were sealed against evil have been told. Now, dim the lights even further, and let the soft hum of the fan lull you into a deep, untroubled sleep.